Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back. Mike Collier here, and I'm delighted to introduce another installment of our Blue Outpost Texas Democrat Candidate Forum. And I want to say welcome on a Sunday evening with 15 days left before the biggest election of our lifetime. I voted today, and I loved every minute of it, even though I think we should be able to cast our vote on a straight party ticket like we used to. I must say, it was quite satisfying to go straight down that ballot and vote for Democrats, all very, very good people. If you're joining us from outside of the state of Texas, I want to say welcome. Listen very carefully. You're going to see so much energy and so much enthusiasm. And a lot of people have gone into that voting booth over the last few days and voted for every Democrat on that ticket. This is a wonderful, wonderful time to be involved in politics. It's also a very essential time to be involved in politics. And I'm delighted to see the turnout is as high as it is. We think that that bodes well for Democrats. We know that it bodes well for democracy. There are going to be some people vote Republican. There are going to be a lot of people vote Democrat. We don't know how this is going to end. But for those that aren't voting Democrat, I have to ask myself this question. Where are your critical thinking skills? Where are your critical thinking skills? Which is a great lead in for what we're going to talk about tonight, because tonight we have two wonderful, wonderful candidates for the Texas State Board of Education. These are two candidates, and they'll be introduced to you in a minute. These are two candidates that I've got to know very well on the campaign trail, very devoted to public education in Texas. They recognize, as do I and so many other people, probably everybody in this session, recognizes public education as a moral imperative. If we don't get education right, we won't get anything right. And for the last 20 years, Texas politics has been dominated by Republicans. Republicans do not share our view. And I will say this, they don't even share our view as to critical thinking skills. I want to pause for a minute and talk about the importance of critical thinking skills. You know, when you've got Fox News and Rush Limbaugh and all of these other QAnon, where do you begin? All of the misinformation, it's tormenting. And there's nothing we can do about it because we also believe in the First Amendment. So there is the only thing we can do. And the good news is that we must do this. And when we are successful in the thing that I'm about to describe, then a lot of our political problems go away. And the thing that we must do is become masters of critical thinking skills so that everyone can take all the data that hits them from so many sources and be the master of their own intellect and make sure that they make good, sound decisions. Now, Democrats believe in critical thinking skills. We know that it's so important. It's important to the economy. It's important to our communities. But Republicans do not. And they might say that they do, but I want to share with you something that not many people know. It's almost hard to believe. If you go back to the Republican Party platform in Texas in 2010, you'll discover a plank that was voted in by that party that said something almost exactly this, along these lines, because these are the Republicans, because we don't want our young people to challenge the given wisdom of their families, we do not support teaching critical thinking skills in public schools. That's worth repeating. The people that we're competing against, Democrats are competing against Republicans, and Republicans said in their platform 10 years ago, we do not support critical thinking skills. Now, the platform was removed after the whole world laughed at them. You can take a plank out of the platform, but you cannot take that mindset out of those politicians in that party. Now, I'm just flabbergasted by that. I also don't think that it's every Republican that feels that way, but I know from my own campaigning, you see it everywhere you go, that Republican candidates for important positions in the state, including the State Board of Education, which we're going to talk about tonight, harbor that. They don't like critical thinking skills because they fear democracy. Democrats cherish democracy, and we are passionate about critical thinking skills. And that's going to be where we start today. So we've got a couple of wonderful candidates. The State Board of Education, they'll tell you more about what that does than I do. I will say this, it's one of the understated, underappreciated, essential political offices in the state, because the members of the State Board of Education in Texas have outsized influence on all aspects of public education, including curriculum, including critical thinking skills. And even if there's something out there that's not within their immediate authority, their immediate remit, for example, testing, they still have a bully pulpit, and they can speak on behalf of teachers who really want to teach and children who really want to learn. I'm Texas teachers' #1 fan. I think high stakes testing is an absolute disaster. That alone destroys, in my opinion, the development of critical thinking skills. I think teachers should teach and children should learn. And I could talk about this topic all day long, but you didn't pay your money to hear me. So when you hear these wonderful candidates, remember we have many perfectly good days left, 15 perfectly good days left. I hope you'll support them financially. They can still get their word out, and you're going to hear from some wonderful Texans who have a terrific point of view about arguably the most important thing that we do, which is public education. So I think this is going to be a fantastic evening. So now, as we always do, let me read off our sponsors. We're delighted that we have folks that are contributing to this effort, and I'm going to read off our sponsors. 312th Family District Court Judge Clinton Chip Wells. 270th Civil District Court Judge Deidre Davis. Club sponsors: the Blue Bayou Democrats, Maryland Area Democrats, Texas Democratic Women, Harris County Chapter, Houston Stonewall Young Democrats, Southwest Democrats, Cy-Fair Area Democrats, Humble Area Democrats, Democratic Club of the Woodlands, Energy and Environmental Democrats, Road Women, Cypress Tomball Democrats, the Kingwood Area Democrats, and the Spring Democratic Club. Thank you to the clubs for sponsoring this. Royal sponsors: former county clerk and my good friend, Dr. Diane Troutman, Carl Jones, good friend of mine, Humble Area Democrats President John Cotter. Thank you so much, John. Sapphire sponsors: Texas Senate District 3 Committeewoman Shirley Layton. Thank you, Shirley. Texas Senate District 7 Democrats, Attorney Mark Whitehead. Thank you so much. And then our organizational sponsors: Powered by the People, Harris County Democratic Party, Flip the Texas House, Sisters United Alliance, Swing Left Texas, Indivisible Houston, Blue Action Democrats. So thank you so much to our sponsors. I'll say one last thing before I turn it over to the folks that are going to lead the conversation. And that is, if you're in Harris County, it's a long ballot, a lot of judges. You've got to vote. Democrats have to vote all the way down from the top to the bottom. But I want you to know that there are an awful lot of judges, Democrats, running unopposed, not a Republican anywhere in sight. That is a very, very good look for us. That tells me that people trust us, and they should. And so this is a very exciting time. And with that, let me turn it over to my good friends who are going to take us through the rest of the evening, Mr. Jaime Rodriguez and Ms. Carly Mosier.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, the feeling of voting finally after 4 years of watching for this day, that must be a relief for you.
I've been waiting for this day for 4 years. I still can't believe that he won. Donald Trump 4 years ago, that was one of the worst nights of my life. I knew that it would be bad. I didn't know what form it would take. It has been bad. It's been awful. I had no idea that it would be a pandemic, but I knew in my heart that we had to do better. We had to do more, and we had to fire him. And I couldn't wait to cast that vote. And I did tonight. And I feel just high as a kite.
That's great. And I mean, 3 weeks of early voting. That's amazing that was allowed this time, that Greg Abbott did that. And I know he regretted doing that the moment he said it. But
well, I think, we've got to be very mindful of voter suppression. We all know that. I mean, that isn't the topic that we're going to discuss tonight. But, they're a political party and they have a lot of power and they're making a lot of money and they don't want to give any of that up. However, this democracy is engineered so that they have to, because they haven't been living up to our expectations. They're indifferent as to our hopes, our anxieties, our fears, and it's time for them to go. And they don't want that for a lot of reasons. And so they're going to do these things, suppress the vote and otherwise. But you can't, I've said this many times, you cannot change the course of a mighty river. And so we will prevail, but we have to do it now. And so we have to be ever vigilant.
Yeah, we still have 2-ish weeks of early voting to go, which is exciting that we can still pull out these great numbers. Our percentages across the counties, across the state are great, but we need to make sure that we don't get complacent now.
And give us the inside scoop one last time. The Biden camp, they're feeling pretty good about Texas right now?
Well, you know me, Jaime, I'm pretty conservative when it comes to polls. I will say this, we cannot leave anything to chance. Yeah. We have to act like we're 10 points down. Mm-hmm. I've said so many times that even if it's a close race and Biden wins, there's still going to be all sorts of difficulties dealing with the people that just can't believe that Trump would lose. We all know what he'll do. Although he did mention that he's going to another country if he loses. I support that. We have to treat it like we're 10 points down and keep our foot on the gas. We cannot. We need to exhaust ourselves. If Texas goes for Biden, and I do believe that Texas can carry Biden. I'm not saying that he has carried. We have work to do, but it's very close. And if/when he carries Texas, we not only vanquish Trump, but we vanquish the movement. And that is so important because that movement is built on racism. It's built on dishonesty. It's built on corruption. It does not reflect our values. The whole world is watching. I believe this, and don't worry, I'll get off the stage. But, people say, well, Trump's really a terrible guy. He's a terrible guy. But the remarkable thing isn't that he's terrible, because the world is full of terrible guys. The remarkable thing is that we elected him. Now, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And we can correct that mistake in a timely manner by firing him in 15 days. And the world is watching. And they will say, okay, everyone makes a mistake. We can trust America again. They did right. If we don't fire him, then I fear that it could be the rest of our lives before we have the stature that we aspire to, because we feel so strongly about our values, and we know what it means when other countries see our values and aspire to be like us. So we have to pretend that we're 10 points down and fight.
Well, and I know we did the interview with you a couple of weeks ago or a week ago. People can go back, and they should go back and look at it if they haven't seen it yet. And we got a lot of these questions out of the way. But the most encouraging thing I think that I heard from that interview with you was that the Biden team has been putting resources into Texas. That just hasn't happened from a national level in so long. And so,
well, that's right. And repeat a little bit of what we talked about last week. I was just delighted. They started to put resources into Texas before the polls told them that they should.
Wow.
And that's because Joe Biden understands the importance of building a party. He knows the momentum that we have here. Coming off of the Beto performance in 2018, the worst thing that could happen would be for us to be a disregarded state. We're humans, and we want to be in this fight, and the momentum is important to us. And we have some fabulous down ballot candidates. You're going to hear from two of them tonight. And Biden understands the importance of party building. And he said, we're going to put money and effort into Texas even before the polls told him he should. And lo and behold, now the polls are telling him, good that you did.
Yeah.
Keep it up.
We can carry Texas if we fight all the way to the finish.
Well, the key word you just said was momentum. So let's get that momentum going, and for the State Board of Education races too. And Mike, thanks so much. We're going to see you Tuesday night.
See you Tuesday.
Okay.
As always. Good night.
Mike.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't be more excited about this first night of 2 nights of panels that are dedicated to the Democrats running for the State Board of Education across our state. It's a really exciting time. Are you ready to go, Jaime?
I think so. Let's go. This is
all right. So first, I'd like to introduce Mr. Greg Alford. He is running for Texas State Board of Education District 14. And we would also like to welcome Mr. John Betancourt. He is running for Texas State Board of Education District 15. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello. Hey, welcome.
Welcome. Yeah, thanks for joining us tonight. For the next hour and a half, we have a great show. We have a lot of questions planned. And the way that this works is Carly and I will ask you questions until about 8 o'clock. And then at 8 o'clock, you, the audience, get to ask your questions. We have some moderators behind the scenes that are looking at Facebook. Carly, tell them where they can go to post their questions.
So we're so excited that we are live streaming not only on Facebook, but also Twitter and YouTube right now. However, the best place to ask your questions to these wonderful candidates that we will ask them at the 8 o'clock hour is to go to Facebook, go to Blue Outpost TX Democrats. Make sure to get into the live comments and ask these wonderful candidates your questions, because your voice is what is most important tonight. Thank you so much. And make sure that throughout the night you give to these candidates $20.20 at the very least. Give them 14 or 15 hours of your time between now and Election Day. We still have several days of early voting going on in Texas. And then, of course, Election Day is November 3rd. And education being probably the second most important, I think it is the top most important issue for all of our working society and civilization. We're so glad that you could join us, gentlemen, tonight. Jaime, do you want to go ahead and carry it on?
We'll just tell you the format that we use here. We start off by giving you each 1 minute to introduce yourselves to our audience. After that, we'll do a little lightning round where you just have 1 or 2 word answers to our questions just to kind of get to know you real fast. Once we get past the lightning round, we'll have some philosophical questions to ask you. We'll give you about a minute to answer each of those. Then we have some more kind of school district specific questions to ask you, which are kind of issues of the day that would concern State Board of Education specifically. At the very end of all of that, we would hope to get a little bit of a discussion, 1 minute from each of you about your district. So you'll tell us, where you're from and all that, more specifically the kinds of people that you're going to be hoping to represent. That'll be right before the 8 o'clock hour. And then again, at 8 o'clock, we'll start asking you whatever questions come in from the audience. And they can be lively questions. They can be varied. And so we don't know what we're going to get until 8 o'clock. But that'll be the format for the evening. So, Carly, if you want to start them off.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, we will ask you each to give us a 1 minute introduction. And then when we ask our questions throughout the night, one of you will start. And then the next question, the other gentleman will start. So we'll start the opposite way that I introduced you. Mr. John Betancourt, if you'll give us a minute introduction.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me on your live stream tonight. The people of Texas, my name is John Betancourt. I'm from Amarillo, from West Texas, and I am a former school board trustee for Amarillo ISD, and I am wanting to take my campaign message and platform to the next level. I learned early on with my service with the school district with Amarillo ISD that the real impact and change regarding public education and the things that our students are impacted on start at the state level, and that's why I am devoted to winning this seat so I can be not only a stakeholder, but also a policy changer and influencer on that governing body board. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. And next we have Greg Alford running for State Board of Education District 14. Mr. Alford, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I have 3 passions. My grandkids, of course, public education and science and math. My background is in science and math. I have degrees in mathematics, physics. I studied physics and astrophysics. I've got a degree in computer science. All of my life, I have been working science and working with science. At the same time, I have been an advocate for public education. I was on a local school board for 12 years. I have done gifted and talented programs at elementary, middle, and high school. I've taught in community colleges in 3 states, and I've taught at university. So the combination of dedication to public education, as well as the desire to help bring our curriculum into this century and serve our current students for the next 30 years of their careers. Well, that's why I'm in it.
Thank you both so much for those great introductions.
Great. So we're going to do a little lightning round. And like I said, some friendly questions just to get to know you. Just answer in 1 or 2 words, not a lot of explanation necessary. And we'll start with Greg. Who's your opponent? Just name your opponent, Greg.
My opponent is Sue Melton, who is from, she lives just south of Waco, Texas.
Okay. And John?
My opponent is Jay Johnson, who is a retired dentist from Pampa, Texas.
And John, how long have you lived in your district?
I've lived in my district the majority of my life. I did have a short time frame where I lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but I'm born and raised in West Texas.
And Greg?
I've lived in Texas for the past 15 years, and I've had driver's licenses in 7 states.
Well traveled.
Both of y'all mentioned previous elected positions. Just run it down one more time. Greg, what other positions have you been elected to before?
I was on a local school board in East Greenbush, which is on the east side of the Hudson River across from Albany. I was there, served in that position for 12 years.
Okay. And John?
I was elected to the Amarillo ISD Board of Trustees in 2015 and completed my term in 2019. And unfortunately, I was not reelected last year. During that time frame of them 4 years, I was named by my peers from Region 16, which is our regional center, as the president of the regional School Board Association, and I was also appointed to the Mexican School Board Association for District 5A.
Oh, okay.
Awesome. John, you're running for school board, so you should have a really good recommendation. We like to ask our candidates if you have a book that you'd like to recommend to our viewers.
A book that I'd like to recommend to our viewers. Well, that's a tough one, because there's so many inspiring books out there, but I would definitely encourage those, if they haven't already, to read the book that Michelle Obama had just recently put out.
Wonderful. And Greg, how about you?
I'm currently reading Democracy Chained, which gives you a history of the economics and history of the alt-right and its philosophical founding. It's a very intriguing. Anybody who is in Texas politics now needs to know the opposition, and that's the book to start with.
I like
Great.
that. Thank you.
Okay, so now our audience has a kind of a better understanding of who they're dealing with tonight. We have some questions. We're going to give you 1 minute to answer, and if you just see my stopwatch go up, just respect the time as much as possible. That just means your 1 minute's up. We're not going to cut you off. It's a friendly night tonight, but just watch for the stopwatch. Okay. So with that being said, the first question, Greg, how do you, in education, there's a lot of innovation, but how do you know that something's an innovation or if it's just prepackaged junk?
Innovation comes from the creativity of the teachers involved. And one of as I've gone around the district and heard from teachers and talked to teachers and superintendents, there's a lot of innovation that happens. One of the purported reasons for charter schools is their increased innovation, but I've yet to see any innovation come from there and be distributed to the public schools. However, we've gotten the African American Studies class out of the work in the El Paso school district area, and recently the Mexican American came from the El Paso, and from Dallas ISD, the African American Studies class. Both are now first in the country to have ethnic studies at that level in high school.
It's fantastic.
And the Libro Traficante from Houston was also very much involved with the Mexican American studies getting passed. But yeah, John?
Innovation to me happens in the classroom, and I think that's why it's important that we fully fund public education to the highest level that we can possibly do so, because when we incorporate innovative curriculum for our peers and for our students, that's when you start seeing the outpour that our students have regarding like robotics and robotics competitions. And whenever you also look at technical type learning, like if you're going to incorporate any type of trade skills into your curriculum.
Thank you both. John, this is a fairly timely question because, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And we have school, an entire semester has just started. We have kids that are doing hybrid learning. We have kids, I know here in HISD specifically, we have children that will be starting in-person learning and teachers that will be going into the classroom for the first time since all of this happened. So my question is a little bit complicated, maybe a little nuanced, but how do we know when these precautions and these staggered schedules, what are the metrics that will show us that this is successful or it's not working? And how do we make those decisions when it comes to, yes, we need to close down the schools again, or we can reopen schools more? What does that look like to you?
Well, for me, I'm a little flip-sided and I'm torn, because I want our students to achieve at their highest level. And I do believe that our students should be in the classroom. However, I do honestly think that they need to be safe. Are our students safe right now in the classroom? Now, that is one thing that is very questionable. And you are right. We could have this conversation every single night. Me personally, I have close family members who have children that have contracted COVID-19, in the classroom who are currently being quarantined right now. So this is a really touchy subject for my family right now. And so I just want everybody to make certain that their children are safe. Superintendents out there and school board trustees who have those opportunities to make those decisions, make sure that you make those decisions with all the data that you have that is provided to you, and also have a plan. If there is an outbreak in your school, make sure you know and your teachers know what to do in the event that occurs.
Thank you. Greg, how about you?
The healthcare goes hand in hand with this issue in terms of education. I'm really proud of all the teachers of Texas that were, over a very short period of time, able to re-engineer the way that they taught over the spring break. Now, it didn't all work out as planned. There were people stubbed their toes here and there. But if anybody had told us in January that every classroom in the state would know how to do distance learning, we all would have been surprised. It needs to be combined with in-classroom teaching when safe. And it's the environment in which the school lives that gives you the statistics about the safety. So you can look at the infection rates that are going on in the community, and whatever they are, they're going to be the same infection rates that will be feeding the school.
Thank you both.
And kind of following up on that, and unplanned between Carly and I, but following up on that, we've heard the University of Texas, when they first came out with their guidelines, say that if one professor died, they would continue in-school learning, but if one student died, they would stop it. And that was a little shocking to hear when that first came out. But, we see that now. There have been teachers that have died, and they continue to do this, and staff members, not just teachers, but staff members who have died. And yet we keep doing this as if the students are the ones that can't be harmed, and so therefore it's okay to continue this. I mean, walk me through that. Greg, we'll start with you.
Well, my background, one of the positions that I had at New York State Department of Health was in the statistics and epidemiology department. So those things that work to combat an epidemic are the same that they've been since the invention of epidemiology. Finding case one and working out the contacts and all those things, those are known, and they work. And that people have politicized the idea of wearing a mask, politicized the idea of going to school or not going to school is a crime. It's a shame. We really need to pay attention to the science. The science is very clear that you need to in order to keep the infection rate as low as possible, you need to keep distance and keep masks on. And that isn't being done is as I say, it's a crime.
John, your thoughts?
Well, in my town alone, we recently had an educator that recently contracted COVID-19 and passed away due to that virus. She was an elementary school educator, and so the entire class had to be quarantined. And so this is something that has devastated my community alone. Amarillo right now is at level red right now. Our hospitals are stressed right now. People are waiting in emergency rooms for even up to 24 hours for a bed to even be available. And the governor has sent us some relief for medical professionals to come out and to assist us during this increase in our positive cases.
Wow. So I'm going to take the question that I was supposed to ask. Sorry, Carly.
No problem.
She and I go back and forth, but I'm stealing her thunder for a second here.
It's fine.
She's going to get to you about unions in a second, but I want to give you a lead-in question to that. There's other cities and other states that have teachers unions that are powerful. I mean, Texas has teachers unions, but they don't have all the ability to do things like strike and things like that other cities and other states have. So I know for a fact in Washington, D.C., the teachers' unions say that when the teachers do their Zoom calls, that first of all, they don't have to go back to the classroom until at least January at this point. And when they're on Zoom, they don't even have to have their cameras on, because it is actually an invasion of privacy into their own home to have their cameras on. So an interesting concept, different way of looking at things. What do you think about that, John? We'll start with you.
Well, I'm a huge supporter of our teachers union, and I think that also assists with the checks and balances with our individual ISDs. And I know the teachers union here locally has been very powerful in working alongside with our school board and our school board administrators to ensure that they at least have a seat at the table when the decision makers are making decisions that are going to affect them and their students in the classroom. Now, in regards to the second part of your question, as far as an invasion of privacy, I work from home as it is. And so I participate in a lot of Zoom meetings with my coworkers. And so half of us have our cameras on and the other half have our cameras off. I just think it's a different day and age that we live in right now. And so I respect whatever each individual's decision is, what they decide to do with their own home and their own privacy.
Greg?
Yeah, it's very important that however the representation of teachers are established, whether it's through a formal union or in informal cases, that they have, as John said, a seat at the table. Good decisions get made with the collaboration of different perspectives. And one sees that over and over again in business, and it should work. It works as well in schools. It's when outside people who don't have a clue what's going on try to make all the decisions that bad things result. So the teachers definitely have the most knowledge and the most experience, and their representation is absolutely essential in order to be able to not only get us through this pandemic, but they deserve that same respect in every aspect of education.
So, Greg, are there specific efforts that you would support that would come within the umbrella of a teachers union?
I have to admit that I'm not completely well versed on the legal status of unions in Texas. I know that there are unions, but they're sort of toothless. When I was on a local school board, of course, we were then management and negotiated with the teachers union, and it was a hard fight. Over the 12 years, we had negotiated 3 different teachers contracts and 2 administrative staff contracts, and the give and take of those conversations are important. And I believe that they have the organizations, that people have a right to organize and be represented in collective bargaining.
John?
Most definitely. I support anything that a teachers union presents, as long as it's something that is aligned with what we can do as a governing body. I will support the teachers out there when it comes to your pay, when it comes to your health insurance, when it comes to your benefits, and whenever it comes to your retirement. So just know that I will be that candidate that will be fighting for you, not only for your students at the state board, but also in Austin for you in regards to your pay and your retirement and then your benefits, but not also that, most importantly, teaching to a test. I'm not in support of our standardized testing. So just know that you have a strong ally in this candidate.
So along those terms, workplace safety is one of the things that y'all are probably going to be fighting for. But before we even had the discussion of workplace safety, we had this discussion about class size. Now it's become a safety issue, but before it was an education issue, specifically pedagogy. You know, good pedagogy can't happen if you have too many kids stuffed in a crammed in a classroom. So what's going to be determining class size going forward in the future too? I mean, I know budget has a lot to do with it, and well, let me not put words in your mouth, John. What's going to determine class size in the future?
You know, that is something that is definitely a good question. I haven't heard anything recently that would say what would determine class sizes. And of course, with the current pandemic that we are currently learning to live with right now, my assumption is that our educators are going to have to ensure that they maintain the social distancing for the in-classroom learning, and also provide any type of protective type measures and gears that our school districts are going to have an additional expense in procuring.
Greg?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of statistics about about outcomes versus class size, and the optimal number seems to be someplace between 20 and 25 in various studies around the country. And class size is not in the purvey of the State Board of Education. We can have opinions. We can use bully pulpit, as Mike Collier said earlier, in order to try to advocate for things. But that's not something that we directly control, nor is the negotiation with teachers union and teachers groups at the ISD level. But there is an optimal place for that to go in. However, technology jumps in and changes things. There is a class in introductory computer science given at Stanford, free to 300,000 students per semester. So that kind of changes the whole perspective on class size. The technology can change it radically. Now, clearly a graduate school level is a little bit different than trying to teach kindergarten. One of my colleagues has got a kindergartner that is trying to do distance learning with and he showed the picture of the kids going on, and it looked like a game of whack-a-mole going up and down as the kids were there. So it varies, but distance learning can change the equation on that.
Thank you. So we're in Texas, and sports plays a critical role in a lot of the development of a lot of students across our state. However, we're also in the middle of a pandemic, in which having fans gather, it's all very interesting. So what do y'all see the role of sports being in schools for Texans going forward, Greg?
Again, it's not a topic that's in the purvey of the State Board of Education. When I was on school board, we had a saying that we couldn't wait for the day when scholars got athleticships.
I agree. I'm right there with you. I like that.
So there are for our opposition who thinks they want to run schools as a business. The value returned to the tax base of people with a quality education is far greater than the value returned to the tax base of those one in a 10,000 or 100,000 who make it in one of the upper tiers of athletics. Athletics is a great activity. It's a lifetime. It's a lifestyle thing. Learning to run in cross country, learning to play tennis, learning to play golf. Learning to work with people on a team. Well, that's not the same as collaborating in business. All of those are important, but sometimes we give them too much weight.
Thank you. John?
Just to reiterate what Greg said, is that this governing body does not have any decision in regards to athletic or sports. One thing that we do love in Texas is our UIL competitions. And so we have seen our athletes rise and shine in the midst of this pandemic, and we have seen our school districts enforce social distancing in our outside competitions. And so I just want to make sure that we are keeping our students safe and our spectators safe.
Great. That's what I was hoping y'all would answer.
So those of us with our ear to the ground on the education industry, we talk about high stakes testing all the time, and it's a big deal. I think Democrats more than anything are quickly and easily against it. But how do we hold schools accountable? So what is the alternative to simple high stakes testing? John?
I think you look at student outcomes. And if our students are reaching those benchmarks, and also you look at the curriculum, you look at redesigning the TEKS, which you have to remodify and make improvements in your TEKS before you can start looking at your curriculum and what the implementation of the curriculum is going to be. Now, I firmly do believe that we should incorporate diversity into that curriculum, sciences into that curriculum, sex education into that curriculum, ethnic studies of Mexican American, African American, Indigenous American, Asian American. And so I think that we have one of the greatest opportunities with this election in electing Democratic candidates who are going to assist at that table in making good curriculum decisions that are going to affect student outcomes.
Greg, how do we hold school districts accountable?
Well, I have this saying about particularly about the STAR test, that it's a poor implementation of a bad idea. It's a bad idea to believe that you can write a test that will test the child, the teacher, the principal, the building, the campus, and the ISD. That's not scientifically possible. And it's a poor implementation when you issue a third grade reading test and the reading level of the third grade reading test is fifth grade. So so we're not doing a good job of creating those tests. We do need to have assessments. We need to know where the child is at coming into school, and we need to know where they are going out. But spending a huge percentage of the school year preparing for a test that'll help the ISD look better in their statistics makes no sense. And as Mike Collier said, it does not insert critical thinking into the lives of the students when we spend so much time practicing for multiple choice tests. I guarantee you that the teachers who were able to redesign education did not look back at any multiple choice questions and say, oh, that was answer B.
Those are both great answers, and I appreciate your being so candid with us about all of this. But I would be remiss if I did not stop for a second and remind our viewers, we need your questions. We do have several questions that have come in through our audience participation, but we need your questions. So don't forget to go to the Facebook Blue Outpost Texas Democrats page, and in the comments, drop your questions for these two wonderful candidates who clearly are ready to take on the State Board of Education. We also hope that you'll donate at least $20.20 to each campaign and give them some of your time. We find a lot of volunteers for the candidates that may be at the top of the ticket, but for us here in Texas, some of our most important candidacies are the candidacies for our State Board of Education because they control literally our future. So please make sure to sign up for shifts to phone bank for them, or do lit drops for them, or with them, or postcards, whatever it is that whatever opportunities that they have, please sign up for those. On to our next question. This should be a fairly easy question, but I would like to know, do you support mandatory certification for all teachers? And I would like to also ask you not only just about your regular teachers, but also your substitute teachers. Greg, to you first.
Yes, certification of teachers is important. Now, one of the things that is in the purvey of the State Board of Education is we The board approves the set of credentials for becoming a teacher in Texas. Unfortunately, we have a dual standard, right? In the charter schools, those standards don't apply, those requirements don't apply. And over the years of the GOP dominance, the criteria for teachers has gone down and down. The way that Finland was able to take itself from the least well-educated country in Europe to the most well-educated country is by elevating the standard of teachers, by bringing them to the same starting salary as every other four-year degree person would have, by doing teacher education at university level, which accepts the top 10% of students. And that brought teachers greater gravitas in the community.
Thank you, John.
I am a supporter of certified teachers for our core curriculum subjects. However, let's keep in mind that we are going to also have educators that are going to be working in the classrooms that are going to be teaching other things that are not part of that core curriculum. Stuff that like your expert in like technical fields like drafting skills, business skills, typing skills, and those individuals may not have a teacher certification, but they are all still capable of teaching and leading the classroom. That would empower and could make a huge difference in our students' lives.
Thank you.
So, same question, but what about administrators? You know, I know that there are several charter schools in Texas where the principal has a bachelor's degree. Tell me how you feel about certifications and minimum requirements for administrators. And John, we'll start with you.
I think our administrators need to be prime rib when it comes to educational candidates that we're looking at employing. And so I definitely do think that all our superintendents need to have that superintendent certification. I do believe that our principals do need to have that master's level type of education that way so they can assist in leading their schools and their school districts.
Greg?
Yeah, I would agree. This is probably going to get me in trouble, but I'm not afraid of that. I think there's only one state in the union whose leader of their state level educational organization has a leader who does not have a doctorate in education. And the initials, the postal code for that state is TX.
Well, that's terrifying. Thank you for that, Mr. Alford. How do you guys feel about partnering with universities or partnering universities with school districts? Greg, we'll start with you.
Oh, I think it's a wonderful idea. The places that I've seen that done, and there's some excellent schools here in Texas that do that. The students come away with their high school degree and a number of credits for college, helping reduce the cost to do that. It's a great opportunity. Teaching beginners is wonderful. It keeps you honest. As a teacher, I always like to teach the introductory class, because the hardest thing to remember is what it was like not to know. And by teaching the beginners on something, you continually give yourself fresh mind in how to understand the discipline that you're teaching. And that giving college professors the opportunity to work with secondary school kids gives them an opportunity to continually refresh how they express things and how they do it. I think it's a great program.
I really like that. John?
I definitely do believe that it takes a village to raise a child, and part of that village are our higher educational facilities. And so I'm a firm believer and I'm a firm supporter that we should incorporate some type of relationship with our local ISD and with our high schools and also with our junior colleges and universities. We are seeing in some areas of the state where this relationship has worked really well. Like Greg had said, it reduces the amount of time that they're going to spend at that university level. And then also some of our high school graduates are actually graduating with associate's degrees as well. And so that's pretty inspiring that they're able to do so much in such a little short period of time.
So I'm going to give you an example. The Houston Independent School District, the largest school district in Texas, has an annual budget of about $2 billion. They passed a $2 billion bond issue back in 2012 to build new schools. Most of those schools have not yet been built. They are already over budget and are looking for more money. But, it's funny, the school district itself has not been audited since 2004 when Rod Page was the superintendent. And if you remember, Rod Page ended up becoming the Secretary of Education under George Herbert Walker Bush. So it shows you, under George W. Bush, sorry. And it shows you how long ago it's been since there's been an audit of this major school district. So my question is, on the school board, would you all be in favor of mandatory audits, periodic audits? It could be every 5 years or whatever the standard is, periodic audits of every school district in Texas. And John, I guess we start with you.
Most definitely. We want to make sure that our school leaders and administrators are doing their due diligence in managing their budgets and ensuring that they are expensing out with what is legal, but also making good procurements. And in regards to school districts going out to bond elections, if our state fully funded public education, our school districts would not have to depend on our local taxpayers to help and front the bill. So the state needs to do better in providing funding to our schools.
Greg?
Well, again, this is a topic that's outside of the scope of the SBOE. Auditing is a good thing. Auditing of all the schools, public and charter, needs to occur. Most of the time, I think only does a bond issue go out when you are making capital improvement, when you're building new buildings and those kinds of things, because that takes an influx of immediate cash that you can get from issuing bonds, which you can't raise locally, and then not, it doesn't work out that way. So bond issues are for capital construction activities, and they definitely need to be audited. But so does the operational budget of the school, the schools in some way. Now there are techniques that the SEC uses for auditing all the big companies, so we should be able to use those same techniques to audit the schools.
So, Greg, what are your feelings about multilingual requirements for students that are graduating high school?
I would love to have all the students be able to speak multiple languages. It gives but I have to say, as a student myself, I have not been able to master more than one. I jokingly say that in high school, I majored in French 1. Right? It's a major if you take it 3 times, right? So I took French 1 3 times. I tried to take German when I was in college. The only way I got out of the liberal arts requirement of taking a foreign language is when they decided that a computer programming language was an acceptable alternative. So as a computer geek, I was all over that.
That's certainly a fair point, though, and something I hadn't thought about. I like that. John?
I think that would be a great idea. However, I think even a better idea is to make sure that we incorporate some type of curriculum that reaches out and helps our English language learners and our bilingual students as well. And to me, I think that is more important. In my area, I know some schools have an influx of refugee students. And so you may have one school that may have over 30 different languages spoken at their campus. And so I think we need to do better in serving those students.
Great point.
So let's go back to funding for a second, because I think I hit a little nerve, and it's great to listen to it. Let's talk about Robin Hood for a second. John, why don't you explain what Robin Hood is to our audience, and then tell us what you think about it?
From what I understand, Robin Hood is where you're taking money and budgets from your larger school districts, and you're funneling some of that money to assist some of your smaller school districts. And so I think that we need to look at ways, and this is something that this governing body does have a say-so in doing, from what I understand. I think we need to do a better way in looking at making determinations on how we split up that money, because there may be some students in some of our larger school districts, Dallas, Houston, Austin, to say that maybe some of that funding is being taken away to some of the smaller school districts, but yet their students are doing away with other important programs or different curriculums that they could be working with them on.
Greg, give us your version of the explanation, and then tell us if you like it or not.
Yeah, I think that the Robin Hood program is something that's established in the legislature, not by the SBOE. And the idea of it, John has right, of being able to spread the wealth around. However, when you do that, one would expect that the money taken from the wealthy districts to be distributed to the smaller districts, that the numbers would add up. And in point of fact, we see that that's not happening, that there is an amount of money that disappears during the transition from the wealthy districts to the poor districts, and it becomes kind of a mysterious budget allocation item at the state level. So if we're going to do that, we need to do it fairly. And I don't think it is. And I'd be happy to work with members of the legislature to improve the funding formula. There's a saying attributed to Mark Twain that God is omnipotent, but one thing God doesn't understand is the copyright law or the Texas formula for wealth distribution.
Yeah, part of that is that they use the tax base to determine wealth. And so if you're downtown Houston, you've got a huge tax base because of all the businesses that are there. But the kids that are in schools in the downtown Houston area are not from those wealthy families. They're not from those wealthy areas. So they get punished when that tax base gets taxed in that way. And then it was supposed to go into a separate school fund at the legislative level. And instead it goes into the general budget. It's being thrown into the general budget. And so that's why I was trying to figure out if y'all had thoughts on that right now. I mean, y'all can certainly admonish the state legislature once you're on the State Board of Education. You'll have a bully pulpit. You'll have a voice that they would strongly listen to. So just throwing that out for y'all when you get elected.
I don't know whether they'll listen to us or not, but that doesn't keep us from talking about it.
Well, and if all goes right, we'll be flipping the state house too, right, Carly? So,
that's the plan. That's the plan. So if we can get y'all some great allies and accomplices, so to speak, in the state legislature, so that we can really move some policy forward, that would be the ideal. I'm sure we are reaching our 8 o'clock hour, which means that we have about a minute for each of you to talk about the specific needs of your district. So I would like for you to take it away. Greg, we'll start with you. A minute to talk about what you think your district particularly needs.
My district is District 14. It borders on DFW. It's the north boundary, the west boundary, and the south boundary of DFD. It has a large urban, suburban county, Denton County, and then it wraps all the way around, going all the way to Waco, and encompasses a lot of rural districts, rural counties between those two cities. So it gives me the perspective. I taught high school in rural South Dakota. I went to high school in a rural Madison County, and I have Madison County, New York. And there's a difference in policy that needs to occur between the things that happen in urban suburban environment versus rural. And we need to be able to master the skill of building our policy in a way that represents both of those constituencies.
Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate that. John, you.
My district is District 15, which encompasses 77 West Texas counties, ranging from the Amarillo area, Midland area, San Angelo, Lubbock, and Wichita Falls, and all the smaller cities in rural areas around it. It is by far the largest real estate that this governing body does govern. And historically, it's been a Republican-held seat for as long as I can remember. And so when I tell you I have my work cut out in flipping this seat, I definitely have my work cut out for me. And so what my district needs an educational advocate that is experienced, that is wanting to go to Austin to advocate for the students, because every student in Texas deserves a quality educational experience. Every student matters, every educator matters, and every retiree matters. And so this individual needs to represent every single one of those 77 counties at that state level and do the right thing.
Thank you so much, both of you. A reminder, please donate to these wonderful candidates. Make sure to give them some of your time. Make sure to tell your friends, your neighbors, your family, everybody that you know that hasn't voted yet. Although if you haven't voted yet, no time like tomorrow, first thing in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, polls open. We would like to start asking you some of our audience questions. Great. And our first question is kind of near and dear to my personal heart. I am a graduate of the high school for the performing and visual arts. So our question from the audience and from me too is, do you support funding education that is surrounding the arts, and whether that be in a traditional school setting or in any other school setting, like a targeted school? And we'll start with John.
I support using public dollars to fund public education. Now, if those public educational school districts have any type of programs and curriculum that's art driven, I definitely am a supporter of that.
Thank you. Greg.
Everything's connected. Everything's connected. And a student who is into science and math their brain studies let us know that listening to music, understanding how music is put together, understanding the relationships of color as it goes into things, all of that is connected. So you can't just arbitrarily draw boundaries between what's in and what's out of education. It really is a continuum of all the different activities of human expression. And drawing lines and boxes and those kinds of things just doesn't work. That's not the way our brains work. It's not the way that education needs to be organized.
Thank you.
The audience member asks a question that's a version of a question that we like to ask sometimes. And that is, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and fix one issue. So you got elected on the first day, they grant you the ability to fix one issue. What is that one issue that you're going to fix for us, Greg?
There is no question that in Texas, the manner in which we distribute the money reinforces the traditional systemic racism in the country. And if I had a magic wand, then I would find a formula by which we can make sure that all the students who need education, who want education, can have it and the funding is provided. Just as we had the saying on our school board before, The one we had that covers this is we can't wait for the day when education has all the money it needs and they have to have a bake sale to buy a bomber.
John.
My response to that question, I agree with everything that Greg said, but if I had a magic wand and if I could end anything that I could end right now, it would be poverty. And I say that because in my town, I learned that the average homeless person was 9 years old. And to me, that literally breaks my heart. Mm-hmm. And so if we could find a way to end poverty, then that would be my one wish.
And I will say, just speak for a second on how systemic that is. I have a 5-year-old great nephew who has had to go back to school in person, and his mother was commenting to me how tough it must be for other children in other school districts, because they have to have now 3 sets of supplies because of the pandemic. So you have to have 1 set for one classroom, 1 set for the other that only he can touch, and because of COVID regulations, but that is economically unsound for too many families. So there has got to be a way. I really appreciate both of your comments on that very much. Thank you so much. Our next audience question kind of goes into what we're discussing. Do you support hazard pay for our teachers? And we will start with John.
Most definitely, especially now since we are dealing with this pandemic and our educators are teaching in ways that they have not been accustomed to teach before. And the days of teaching in just the classroom alone, but our teachers and educators have additional stressors. They're having to work late in the evenings with the new teaching model.
Greg?
Yeah, I think that in these times, that's definitely appropriate. It was even a request back when I was on a local school board. Our junior high teachers thought that being in junior high with the 8th and 9th graders with all their hormones popping, that they needed hazardous duty pay too. Yeah, there are challenges that need to be compensated for in the life of a teacher, and this is certainly one of them.
So our audience member wants us to go back to a question we started to address earlier, and it's high school and school athletics. They want you to talk a little bit about how much funding, proportion-wise, goes into athletics, and what are your thoughts on that? If you can speak to that at all, Greg.
Yeah, I'm not. I have not been on a Texas ISD and know the relationship between the ratios of athletic budget versus academic budget. I just leave it at that. John was on an ISD. I was not.
John,
I'm not familiar with that in regards to like what a state budget looks like in regards to athletics, but I would highly encourage the person that's interested in getting an answer to contact somebody from UIL.
John, our next audience question is about charter school applications. What would your policy be on voting on new charter school system applications?
I don't support charter schools. I support public educational.
Thank you. Greg, that seems pretty succinct. Greg?
Yeah, in the book that I mentioned earlier, one of the things that they talk about is the foundation of this so-called school choice and the whole choice thing. And it derives from the idea of wanting to do away with public education. And you can see that activity having gone on in Texas, where the leadership of the state has overregulated and underfunded public education for a long period of time. And their solution is the same solution that the same group of people used in order to take away the public hospitals in Texas by underfunding them and then criticizing their outcomes that they got. And it's the same strategy they're using to try to replace public education with corporate-owned education. And it's just not what our founding fathers wanted. It's not what we need as a democracy. And there will have, for the first time this past year, the SBOE executed its right to veto charter applications when the applicants did not measure up to the SBOE's expectations. And I will continue that tradition.
So going along with what this user asks, I remember seeing one of the curriculum books, history books in Texas recently, talking about slavery as having provided jobs for people. You talk about fixing the curriculum. How do you fix? I don't want to say how do you fix stupid, but how do you fix curriculum that it's not only lying and it's not only misleading, but it's dangerous. Dangerous. Greg?
There are examples in our curriculum. You give one of them where the origins of the Civil War are described as having been economic. That was an outlook that came up in the post-revolutionary or post-Civil War days in order to be able to give added emphasis to the struggle that occurred. And it just wasn't true. If you look at the source documents, the resignation letter of Jefferson Davis or the resignation letter of Robert E. Lee, it was clear in their own statements that slavery was the issue that it occurred. So in order to pretend that clearly slavery had an economic impact. And by covering up, calling it slavery and calling it an economic thing is a change of the truth. It is a revisionary perspective on history, and we need to have fact-based history. We need to have fact-based science and math. We are enjoined in Texas from teaching about climate change. We are required under Texas curriculum in order to teach creationism and evolution as if they were co-equal. And these are not the things that our students are going to need for their careers over the next 30 years. One of the biggest growth industries in the country, in the world, is healthcare. And healthcare is more and more being developed in a targeted way using DNA of individuals in order to provide ways to solve health problems. A child who goes into the workforce believing that creationism was positive and evolution is not, doesn't understand the mechanism of DNA and how it works, and they're not going to be very competitive in the job market if that's the perspective that they have.
John, I gave Greg a little bit extra time, so I'll give you a little bit extra time on this one. I know it's
Sounds good. Thank you, Jaime and Carly. And that's why this election is so important. Mm-hmm. Not only to me, but every Democrat that is running for this seat. The State Board of Education is made up of 15 individuals. 10 of those individuals are Republican-held seats. 5 of them are Democratic-held seats. So even if 5 Democrats cannot attend a meeting, they still have a majority. And that's why it is so important that we look at this race with our whole heart and we get voters out there to vote so we can implement curriculum standards that are values to what we believe in, and it gives our students a fighting chance for their future.
I thank you. We were going to ask a question from the audience. It's kind of in the same vein. What are the top 3 changes you would want to make to the curricula? John?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, John.
I definitely want to incorporate in all our ISDs ethnic studies and learning, Mexican American, African American, Indigenous American, Asian American. We need to bring back fact-based, like Greg had said. We need sciences, and we also need some form of sex education implementation.
Thank you, Greg.
Our students are going to live in a world we can't predict. They're going to have careers over the next 30 plus years. Over the past 30 years, we've seen the world change pretty radically. And we saw the world change just this year in terms of the pandemic. The pace of change, the number of surprises that are coming before our students is going to increase. So what we need them to be prepared to do is be literate, be dedicated to becoming lifetime learners, learn how to collaborate, learn critical thinking skills. Good teachers do all of those things, and it's not found in the curriculum anywhere.
That's true.
Those are the topics that need to be brought forward in the curriculum, because the facts will change over time. The opinions will change over time, but it's the process of being able to know yourself well enough to learn, know you how to do critical thinking, doing analysis of what you're reading and what you're hearing that will count.
I'm going to read this question directly as it was written. Schools in DC, New York City, and elsewhere have undergone redesign programs to reach those learners who have traditionally been on the margins. Would you support redesigning schools? And if so, would you support giving them the autonomy needed to get through that process? Greg, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, let's start at the very beginning, right? And I'm not going to do do re mi. Let's start at the beginning. Our educational calendar is based on the idea of supporting our agrarian communities, so that the kids have the summer off to help work the fields and work the crops in order to be able to do things. Even the agrarian portions of our state are not on that schedule anymore. And they don't use hand labor to be able to accomplish the things that they do. It's all mechanized. Even our agricultural students, in order to sell their products, need to have access to high-speed internet in order to exchange with the markets in the world. Even our agricultural students need to know the technology of running a small business, of handling the technologies that are going into the field in order to be able to determine the infestations of pests and the amount of moisture in the soil. There is so much technology that is going all over the place that everybody needs to know. We need to prepare kids for that future.
John?
Most definitely. I would definitely support any type of redesign in our public institutions. Greg had talked about creativity. I would like to, even at my job, we're encouraged to collaborate with one another that way, so we can bounce ideas off of one another. And so I think we need some form of, once after COVID, we need some type of collaborative type space. Now, I have seen some campuses that do have collaborative learning and spaces, maker spaces in their educational facilities. And that is something that I definitely do support.
If I just may add to what John said, the number one ask on the part of employers in Texas and around the country is better collaborative skills. Right. It's not a collaborative activity to say, you three guys get together and work on this project together. There are definite skills in how to be a leader and how to be a follower that need to be taught just the way the other things are taught, because that's going to be one of the primary skills that they'll be using in wherever they're working. They're going to be put in teams and have to work collaboratively. And we need to start it. educating to that need as soon as possible.
I'll echo that and tell you that the Fortune 500 companies all work in teams. I mean, everything is a team-based concept, and you have short-term goals, mid-term goals, and long-term goals that those teams are responsible for. You might have heard the Exxon pizza rule. So the pizza rule is that your team can only be as large or as small as it would take for 2 pizzas to feed it.
Right. Yeah. That comes from the software agile movement as well. And Scrum, I'm a certified Scrum Master, and
there we go. Okay.
The teams you need 2 pizza teams.
Yeah.
So, John, another question, and I'll kind of phrase this in a little broader sense. We have a lot of students in our world that don't necessarily get to finish high school, right? So they may not have the opportunities to get into a college or a university, even a community college. So do you support, or what would that look like? Could the state fund some kind of adult education that will help students get to that point where they can be eligible for college or a further education?
What I think we definitely need to find out what the trigger is that is preventing those individuals from completing their high school career. And if they're unable to do that, why they aren't going and getting their GED, basically. Now, I'll be the first to say that college isn't for everybody, sure. And I think in the day and age that we're living in now, maybe trade skills is something that this individual could possibly look at. And so I definitely do think that we do need to, we're only as good as our community is. And so when I said earlier that it takes a village, that's why it's important for us to have relationships with our school systems and our other entities, our colleges, our junior colleges, even our cities, and even our major corporations. That way we can come together, that way so we can solve the problem collectively together. And so part of that is maybe incorporating some type of career center to where our students can actually go there and learn these different type of skills. They can learn architecture, they can learn welding, they can learn what it is to be an entrepreneur, a business person, a nurse. But along those lines, with the collaboration that we do with those other entities, we could also open the doors to our individuals so they can also further their education in getting those same type of skills so they can uplift their homes and uplift their community.
Thank you, Greg.
When I was on local school board, we partnered with the other districts in 3 other counties and formed what was called a Board of Cooperative Educational Services. And it started off as a way to be able to offer career skill kinds of things, and has evolved. It's called Quest 3 now. And that program teaches nanotechnology, robotics, welding, a whole host of modern techniques that are necessary. And the resource centers that we have in Texas, I think, are underutilized in being a way to be able to have high expense, career-based activities. But we have to keep in mind that people who are want to become a master carpenter, want to become a master plumber, their ultimate goal is going to be to have the skills to be able to run their own small business, which will involve having math skills to be able to run Excel, or a database to keep track of their customers. There's so many different things that be involved in being an entrepreneur that we can bring all of this knowledge together for the kids who are working in that particular track.
This audience member asks a question about professionalism. We want to treat teachers like professionals that they are. Do you believe in giving K through 12 teachers tenure, like professors at colleges might get? Greg? Talk to us about that concept.
There was in the public schools in New York, where I was on the school board, there was tenure track for teachers. The tenure track in colleges was primarily in order to be able to provide a political isolation so that they could be creative in their careers and not suffer the slings and arrows of mood at the moment. That's been under challenge by our adversaries. And I'm sure that they would be as object just as strongly to tenure in the secondary and elementary school level. But some degree of a surety of your position and ability to be able to rise to a position of master teacher or something, and still staying in the classroom, not becoming an administrator, but being able to practice your skills and teach your skills to other teachers, I think is a very important part of what American education needs to become.
Thank you, John.
Oh, definitely. I do think that we do need, especially with COVID, we need to look at revamping our educational facilities and our ISDs and also our governing boards, because our teachers are working their tails off right now. And so we don't need to lose sight from that. We're asking our teachers not only to be educators, but our teachers are also having to be counselors. They're having to be nurses. They're having to take on the role of so many different individuals, social workers at times. They're providing food in the classroom sometimes. And so our teachers go above and beyond, and they are superheroes in my book. And I think we need to do our due diligence and take care of our educators.
Jaime, I think we have time for one more question. Do you?
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
So this one last question, we have a bunch of questions, and if you want to go and answer them afterwards, there are several questions that were left unasked this evening, and I apologize to everyone for that. But this is a good question in that we could always use more money. Every school district could always use more money. But how do we better manage the funds that we have now? John?
We learn how to live within our means. Is what we do. And then we also, someone had mentioned earlier that we treat our ISDs as their businesses. And so we need to make certain that we create our own business model, and we need to make sure that we have attractive educational programs within our ISDs that is wanting outside families wanting to move in to our cities and into our communities that way, so we can educate their students. And I think that is how you do that. That way you bring more revenue into your school district, but then also you also want to be close to your state representatives and those individuals that have those that they have the means to vote in your favor when it comes to making decisions that are budgetary for school districts.
Well, the manner in which we're putting the pressure on teachers in order to teach to the test is withdrawing valuable time resource from the educational process. So we can get more education if we re-rationalize our thought process on testing. We need to have a test at the beginning of the year in order to know where the kids are. We need to have a test at the end of the year so we know where they are. And more importantly, we need those two tests so that we can tell what happened to them over this summer vacation thing that we have. Because it's proven through study after study that kids in poverty lose more over the summer than the kids from parents that can take them on vacations to museums and national parks and that sort of thing. So we need to be able to know where the student is in order to be able to do things. But we can get more value by putting our teachers into the process of teaching
So we're basically out of time, but we do like to give you all the last word. So Greg and John will give you each 30 seconds, and then we'll sign off right after that. Tell us one more time why we should vote for you and if we should even be bothered voting. Greg, go first.
Well, first of all, it hasn't been said yet, and it needs to be said. State Board of Education is the only position on the ballot that where the candidates serve with no salary. John and I are in this, and the other Democratic candidates for SBOE station, SBOE, are in it because we have a passion for the work of curriculum and for the progress of public education. So and public education, there's so many important things on the ballot, but education is the long game. Education is going to have an impact over the next 30 years. So we need to be able to pay attention to it, get the right curriculum in place, get the right funding in place so that our students can be successful over the next 30 years.
John.
Yes, West Texas, I'm talking to you. I have been an advocate for public education since winning my election. I was the second Hispanic male to ever be elected to the school district that I served on. This is the election of our lifetime, and I believe in our students of West Texas. I believe in our educators of West Texas, and I believe in our citizens of West Texas. Elect me on November 3rd, and I will be a champion for you, for your student, and for your families in Austin.
Thank you both so much for your time tonight. Audience, join us on Tuesday as we host 3 more fantastic Democrat candidates running for the State Board of Education and here in Texas. Again, $20.20 and some of your time and definitely your votes to both of these wonderful candidates, and make sure public education is on the top of your ballot. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you on Tuesday.
Thank you, Jaime and Carly. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, everybody.